Thank you all so much for joining us. So who are we? Why is this session here? We are talking about the Dreamers Together Task Force and the various efforts that we are providing for our students and the resources and the student support areas that we have for our campus. My name is Flavio Medina Martin. I am the Director of Diversity and Inclusion. I am privileged to be here with you all. I have one of the responsibilities that I have on campus is to be a chair on the Dreamers Together Task Force. So what does that mean? And what kind of task force is this? So Melody, thank you so much for asking that great question. So part of our task force, actually, let me introduce another chair, Marilyn Jimenez. Introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Marilyn Jimenez. I am one of the chairs of the Dreamers Task Force. And I also work at the college as the administrative assistant to the Office of Academic Senate. And I serve as secretary to Classified Senate. But my role in the Dreamers Task Force is to help, we help put together all these events like the one we're putting together today. And, you know, I do a lot of the marketing and a lot of the email marketing, and some of the marketing goes on social media and on the web. I maintain the website, and, you know, I help to put together some of the agendas and some of the other fun things that we do in our Dreamers Task Force. So that's me.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you, Marilyn. So yeah, so why are we here? So we're here because we want to be able to develop, create, and implement a process, a program, and an initiative that's going to be of value to our undocumented student experiences. So the Dreamers Task Force, we actually have over 80 people that's part of this committee, and we are committed to providing information and again resources to our students, and that comes in various ways. There's various student support services, resources, professional development opportunities, literature reviews, legal resources, events that we host. Part of our responsibilities as chairs is to also look at when we meet and when it meets, when we're able to connect. We actually do meet once a month, the second Friday of every month. And if anyone is interested on this call to be part of the committee or to engage in conversation as to what kind of resources we can provide for our students, please send me an email, either myself or Marilyn Jimenez or Esther Villegas Sandoval, who is also our other chair. So one of the things that we are responsible for is not just meeting as a committee, we also promote town halls. So this coming spring semester, we're actually facilitating 4 different town halls. Tomorrow, we are going to be having a town hall / informational session on our educational counseling resources. What are some online educational resources that are available? Tomorrow from 3 to 4:15, we're gonna have people from our campus come in and speak on that. In March, on March 4th, we're actually going to have a financial literacy workshop that's going to be presented by Latinas Talk Dinero session by Alejandra Magaña and Raylene Hernandez. So we're going to talk a little bit about what financial literacy available options are out there for undocumented students and for all students for that matter. In April, we're going to have mindfulness and artivism on April 21st from 4 to 5:15. In fact, Melody's going to be joining our conversation and what that looks like, along with Basilio Hernandez over from AVC. We're going to talk through what that undocumented student experience is like through the expression of art, images, pictures. So any image that's going to lay out a story or a narrative, I should say, not negative, a narrative on what that undocumented student experience is like. Please join us. That will be again on April 21st. And we're going to end off the spring semester on May 7th from 11 to 12:15. We're going to have our very own Dr. Elizabeth Hernandez. She is our staff psychologist from UCLA coming in, and she's going to be doing an entire session on the undocumented student experience and the mental health component that comes along with being an undocumented student. You don't have to be an undocumented student to see these sessions. Everyone is welcome, students and anyone who is within our campus community to join us. If you have an idea for an informational session or a town hall that you would like for the committee to consider, please again send us an email. Go into the Dreamers website, our Dreamers Together website, and we will be happy to consider that for the fall or even into the summer. Thank you again so much. And I lend it out to Melody Klingenfuss. Thank you so much for joining us from Chirla.
Everyone, thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon. My name is Melody. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And today, as part of the topic that we want to dive into, I'm going to be covering what has been my undocumented experience in higher education. I'm going to be highlighting some of the celebratory aspects of what it means to be undocumented and being in the undocumented community. And then I'll dive into just really all my life experiences that have led me to where I am today. And part of it is just talking about life in general, and part of it is diving into what college was like for me. And my story is a little different than a lot of folks because I actually didn't get DACA. By the way, does everybody here know what DACA is? Or do we need an extra explanation? Okay, we're good, great. I don't want to assume, and if anybody.
Can we do a quick little breakdown, Melody, of that terminology?
Yeah, of course. So DACA is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, and it was signed in 2012 by President Obama, thanks to the work of undocumented youth who pushed him to have some sort of permanent solution. So we didn't get immigration reform, but we got DACA. And so since 2012, the program basically allows folks to get a work permit, a social security, and most importantly, protection from deportation, renewable every 2 years. There have been a lot of different events happening around DACA where there was a time when we couldn't apply anymore, but now as it stands, anybody who is due to renew can renew if their permit expires within 2 months or 4 months. And then anybody who hasn't applied can and who qualifies can also apply for the first time. We're still awaiting a decision by a Texas judge. His name is Judge Andrew Hanen. And so he may throw a wrench into these developments, but we can definitely have another event with CLC to keep you all updated as that comes to fruition. But as of now, as it stands, folks can renew and folks can apply for the first time. And so, I didn't get DACA till 2015. So that means that I was fully undocumented for 3 years of my life. So from age 18 to 21, I didn't have any papers. And you'll hear my story on how I dealt with that. And the purpose of me going into this is because my journey, I hope it inspires all of you. Whether you are a staff who is talking with undocumented students and supporting them, or whether you are undocumented yourself, I hope that my journey inspires you to take your own tools and take what resonates with you and apply it to your own journey. So this presentation isn't meant to give you all the answers magically and just, give you the answer to life or any struggles you may be going through, or you may know someone who's going through for being undocumented, but it's rather created to show you the path that I took, what has worked for me, and apply it to yourself, and because you know yourself better than anyone else, right? And most importantly, it's really to open up some of the tools that I wish I'd known when I started my undocumented educational journey. So I definitely want to highlight those. And so let's dive in. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so y'all can start seeing my first presentation. There we go. Are you able to see it okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that verbal yes, because once I start sharing, I can't see you all. So thank you so much. So this presentation, right, I named it as honest as I could, and it's titled My Bumpy, Fun, Super Honest Road Through Life and School as an Undocumented Person. And right now, I actually serve as the statewide organizer for the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights. We're the largest nonprofit in the nation that has been leading immigrant rights since 1986. And I did want to quickly highlight that we do have legal services, and that's a huge, huge part of what the community needs right now. So if you need to renew your DACA, or if you know someone who does, or if you're thinking of applying to DACA for the first time, we're doing all of those legal services. And I'll be able to, again, present my contact information at the end. It was on my background before I started presenting, but I definitely wanted to highlight that because I think a lot of folks have questions as to where do I go? Who do I trust with this paperwork that can change my life, right? So I wanted to highlight that we do have those services every week and they're free of cost. We don't charge anything. And so, yeah, with that being said and with that being established, I want to dive into my overview of my presentation. So what better way for you all to get to know the undocumented experience and hopefully be inspired by it than using my story of self. So I'm going to be diving into my story of self, and that actually is going to start with me arriving to Los Angeles when I was 9 years old. And then we're going to go all the way to where I am now. So you see what has worked for me. And of course, I'm going to highlight my activism journey, because as myself, Flavio, and Marilyn and Esther were putting together this presentation, we really wanted to give you, in this welcome event, right, in this welcome week, some of the tools to keep in mind and some of the tools that you should dive into holistically, because we don't just exist in the educational sphere, in the educational world, right? We have lives outside of school. We have lives outside of College of the Canyons. And so my presentation is going to dive into some of those aspects to help you see, right? Where do you fit outside of this? Where can you plug yourself in? And so I'm going to conclude by talking about what I wish I'd known. And looking ahead, I'm going to talk a little bit about preparing for grad school, because as undocumented folks, we are not readily always presentable with the information to acquire that next step in our educational journey. But I've been to grad school, so I'm a living testament that it is possible. So I'm going to dive in some of the things that you can start doing now, even before you transfer or even before you finish your educational path at College of the Canyons, to already start getting ready for that, because we don't prepare folks enough. And that's why you came into this space, right? To get that info so that you're ready and you can continue helping others as well. And then I'm going to have some closing remarks and I'll hand it back to Flavio and Marilyn. So yeah, with this quick overview, I'm gonna actually now stop sharing screen, and I'm gonna give you my other presentation. Had to do two for this. And so let's dive into what made me who I am today, right? So my early life, I was actually born in Guatemala, and you'll see, especially if you're undocumented and you're in this room, or if any of your parents are immigrants or anything like that, my journey will have a lot of parallels. And so that's why I'm so excited to start at this part of it, because we usually just go into, okay, what are we doing now? And we forget to step back and see where we're coming from. And so that's why I'm starting with this journey right now and this part of it, so you can relate to it. And I think you will. And so I actually was born there. And I grew up on the frontier with El Salvador, so I could actually cross between both countries. It was just like a mile away from my home. And so, you know, this story is pretty typical about overcoming sacrifice or having sacrifice and overcoming hardship. And it actually starts with my mom. So that's my mom and that's me. I still have that clueless look on my face sometimes.
Aww.
I know, and
I love it.
Thank you. And my mom still looks the same. And I want to highlight this part because, you know, this was right before she left me to come to the US to be able to give me a better life. So she was an H mom, as you can see. And you know, that goes into a lot of different aspects of how life is in countries like Guatemala, right, where there's not enough sexual education, right? There's not enough understanding of that. And so my mom had to make that choice to leave me. And she arrived to Los Angeles, and she would basically work on the Hollywood Strip at different stores and be able to send money back so that my other family could take care of me. But you know, my biological father wasn't in the picture. And so I basically grew up without parents. So I wasn't, I was actually raised by my grandpa and my grandma, as you can see on the screen. And, you know, my grandpa passed away when I was about 4 years old. And from then I wasn't able to come to the US till I was 9. And so, you know, having a childhood without parents really put into perspective what my purpose is in life. And maybe y'all can relate to that, because sometimes family separation starts in the country of origin, right? And that's why I want to highlight that, because I don't think we talk enough about the roots of migration, right? There's just so many different perspectives and reasons why folks migrate. And so I really wanted to touch base on this. And so before I dive into what life was like coming into LA as an immigrant, I want to also just pinpoint one of the earliest memories that I had. So the only way that I could actually talk to my mom every week was to cross into El Salvador, because El Salvador was the only country that had international phones. And so every Tuesday at 7 p.m., I would have to dial the same number so that I could call my mom. I still remember the number. It was 323-467-2094. You know, it's been all these years and I never forgot, because if I forgot that number, that means I wouldn't be able to call my mom. And so that was the only communication that I had with her. And so this was me. This was me when I arrived to the US. So I arrived into the heart of LA, and LA became my second home. So if any of you are from Koreatown, that's where I grew up. I grew up in Koreatown. Miss it. I miss it so much. I'm not there anymore, but that's what it was like. And for me, you know, the language barrier was the hardest. And I think a lot of folks can relate to this. I didn't know English. So what I did, as you can see, I read all the books you could imagine. I read The Great Gatsby was the first book that I ever read. And I wanted to read it because I wanted to know why that lady was so sad in the cover. And then I read all the Goosebumps books. If anybody remembers their Goosebumps books, R.L. Stein, I read all of them. And then I did summer school and, you know, my elementary, my middle school, and that's how I was able to master the language, right? And so with that being said, that came with a lot of anxiety, right? Just being assimilated to a whole different culture and just changing my whole way of life. It was really difficult, and kids, you know, were pretty mean. They wouldn't translate for me or anything. And so from the very get-go, you're faced against all these different challenges that you don't really process until you're older. And so, and you'll see in my presentation, that's a lot of the things that I talk about, where I didn't notice what I was going through at that time. And so having mental health help after the age of 20 made me realize all the things that I was going through. I had so much anxiety and actually a little bit of depression, and I didn't get notified about this till I went to therapy when I was 22. And so while I'm talking about all this and what I went through as a young immigrant, as a young child, right? When I came to the US, like I realized there were all these different aspects that I couldn't even process. And so that really goes into the typical experience, right, that immigrants have. Even though all of our stories are different, that theme about having these different mental health issues stays the same. And so as you're coming into College of the Canyons, right, as you're embarking into this journey, I highly encourage you to tap into that already. I'm sure Flavia and Marilyn can connect you. And I know you all are having presentations with your counselor and with an emotional therapist as well. And so, you know, tapping into that is very important for the success that you're going to have on your educational and personal journey. And so now I want to quickly dive into my high school experience. And so as you can see, I did JROTC for 4 years. I was number 2 in the district. I was a nerd. I had a 4.0. I had 6 AP classes, and I'm gonna stop sharing screen now. And I was voted most likely to succeed. And everybody was out of my whole class, right, out of the 800 kids who were graduating, I was the one voted that way. And I was getting ready to apply for USC, and I see all the comments on the chat. Goosebumps. I'm glad that y'all connect with that. That's great. And I think that's really good to keep in mind as well, because sometimes especially I see some staff here, as you're interacting with undocumented students, right, it's also important to remember, right, like those language barriers or those cultural barriers that we can work through, right? So I was getting ready to apply to USC. That was my dream school. And as I typed in my application, it asked me for a social security number. And that's when I realized that I was going to work twice as hard to get half as far as everybody else. That's when I realized that I wasn't the same. And so it started with little things. It started with, you know, people asking me, oh, what Ivy Leagues did you apply to? Or what privates did you apply to? And I was so ashamed to tell them that I couldn't apply to any of those schools, even if I had the GPA, because I didn't get any of those waivers. So that meant that my mom had to pay for each application, and it's about like $80 or $90 per application, right? So it adds up really quickly. And so that came with a lot of shame, and I kept to myself, and because everybody expected me to do so well, and yet I was there undocumented and not being able to apply to any of those schools. And then people started getting accepted into college. So they were telling me about how awesome their dorm is, and you know how excited they were to check into their dorm and travel and leave LA. And all I could think of is, I hope I get into Cal State LA or Cal Poly Pomona. Those were the only two schools that I was able to apply to. And I say this because at that time I felt ashamed. You know, I felt ashamed of that. But even as you're coming into a community college, I also feel like there's a lot of stigma by starting at a community college. And it's actually one of the smartest things you can do, because you get all your classes here and you get them at an affordable cost, right? And then that way you're able to transfer later on to whatever school you want to. And it's a much easier pathway, and it's definitely an honorable pathway to take. So I definitely want to highlight here now that maybe you ended up here as an undocumented person and not expecting to be at a community college. And again, I think that comes with a lot of stigma, like the one I experienced. And so I'm here to tell you that it's okay. Whatever journey you take, even if it takes more than 4 years, even if it takes more than 2 years for you to transfer, that is completely normal, right? Especially because maybe we are low income folks and we're supporting our family while taking on this education. And as undocumented folks, that's even harder. So it's totally okay if your educational journey isn't linear and your educational journey is tied in with a lot of the limitations that come with being undocumented. So I'm here to tell you it's totally okay. And so at the time, I just really want to go into some of the struggles that I had with not having DACA. And I really hope that speaks to some folks here, because maybe you still don't qualify for DACA now. And it may seem that your opportunities are very limited. And even though that is the case, I want to show you how I was able to overcome that as well. And so when then, you know, graduation came. So I graduated 6 days after DACA was announced. And my mom was so excited because she's like, oh my God, it's perfect. You're about to graduate high school and you can get your work permit, like you'll be great. And it turned out that there were a lot of complications with my country of origin. So I didn't get DACA till 3 years after. So instead of me applying for DACA, what I applied for were some of the jobs in really exploitative environments. So I don't know if how many of you ever been to the alleys in Los Angeles? They call it Los Callejones. Yes, all of us, because yeah, we get all of our cheap stuff there. Yes, Brandon, I see you. and Teresa, so sorry, but we are recording this. So I'm sure Flavio will share our presentation with you. Yes, thank you, of course.
You have some amazing tacos there too.
Yes, they do. They have hot dogs, everything. And so it sucks, you know, because actually my experience with the alleys was horrible, because I would work there from 9 to 7 for $45. And it was, yeah, and I would sell curling irons. I still have some of the burns that I have from the curling irons that I would sell. I would sell handbags for the most part. And then I actually ended up at Olvera Street. So have any of you ever been to Olvera Street, Pasito Olvera? That's where I worked. So they have this huge store called Olveritas Village, and that's where I would work. So I actually ended up going to Cal State LA because I had really good grades. And so it was like I had two different personalities. And I definitely want to quickly touch on this, because I think as folks are coming into their college education, you may feel like you have an imposter syndrome. Like you may feel like you don't belong, right? Maybe you are first generation college student, and as an undocumented person, it can be very intimidating to even share your status. And, you know, luckily here in California, we do everything that we share or anything that is said about your status, right? Especially with really inclusive folks like Flavia and Marilyn and all the staff here at COC, like your information is safe, right? And that is because folks here in California have fought for that, right? Like the youth before me, even before DACA, they had been fighting for undocumented folks to be included in higher education. It's not the same case as in Texas, right? There are more limitations there. It's not the same case as in Montana, right? Where there's only about 60 DACA folks there in the whole state. Over here in California, we have 220,000 DACA folks. So that means that 1 in 4 DACA recipients is from California. So for us, right, the verbiage being accustomed to talking about undocumented issues in California is very different from other states. So I do want to acknowledge that privilege, that when you feel like you have that imposter syndrome, you have to work through it. You have to continue reminding yourself that you do belong here, that, you know, you are welcome in this space, and that you deserve to be here as much as the next person, regardless of your situation, regardless of your status, because I struggled a lot with that. And I wish somebody would have, you know, just come up to talk to me about it and just mention it, and it would have made a huge difference. And so, you know, while I was working at Olvera Street and going to Cal State LA, yeah, I just felt like I was two different people. There was Melody, who was exploited at work because I was only paid $55 at Olvera Street. And I was used because of my English skills to translate to the tourists. And then there was that other Melody who would go to Cal State LA, and I was in the honors program there. You had to maintain a 3.5 or above. By the way, if any of you are interested in transferring to Cal State LA, let me know. I would love to connect you to the honors college there. They're an amazing program, completely life-changing. And so, yeah, I would participate in these classes that were seminar style, and people wanted to hear my thoughts, and I felt so intelligent, you know, and so there was two of me. And it was like every time I stepped into work, I had to strip myself away from the scholar, or, you know, from the person who was interested in being an academic. And vice versa, when I stepped into Cal State LA, you know, I had to really step up and step out of my comfort zone. And so I want to mention that because it can be very intimidating also to get the right paperwork. And so as undocumented students, we know we do qualify for in-state financial aid through the California DREAM Act. The deadline is coming up in just a week, so March 2nd. And then we also do qualify for AB 540, which is in-state tuition. So I want to remind folks who are here in this space to connect with Flavia, connect with Marilyn if y'all need to get that paperwork filled out. But you need to do it now, because it can be very confusing, especially now that we're, you know, virtual. It may be very confusing to get the information. And that was the case for me at Cal State LA, where I constantly had to tell people, oh, wait, no, I don't qualify for FAFSA. I qualify for the California DREAM Act because I'm undocumented. So you constantly have to educate folks, right? And at times it gets really tiring because you're like, people should know this already. You know, it's been a law for many years. But a lot of colleges and a lot of staff are still falling behind of not knowing what laws you qualify for. So you constantly have to keep making space for yourself and making sure that you have the right paperwork. And luckily, you know, here at COC, we do have like Fabio and Marilyn and other folks here who can help you get that paperwork. But when you transfer, you know, that's also something else to keep in mind. So I definitely want to encourage you to get all your paperwork in. There are laws that you have the right to here in California. Nothing that happens at the federal level affects those laws. We saw that when Trump ended DACA in 2017, within those 6 months, we saw 20,000 less California DREAM Act applications, 20,000. And that is tied directly to the confusion, right, of, okay, if DACA ends, then I no longer qualify for this. That is completely untrue. You still qualify here in the state of California, regardless of whatever happens with DACA at the federal level. And so I just want to highlight a few more points before I dive into the rest of my presentation, where it deals more with some of the opportunities that I chose. And so I want to let you all know that regardless of your status, regardless of whether you have DACA or not, you do qualify for scholarships. You do qualify to apply to those financial opportunities. There's a lot of misinformation out there where folks feel like they don't qualify for different scholarships, and you may not qualify for all of them because some scholarships do require for you to have citizenship, but you do qualify for a lot of them. And so I highly encourage you to look into those scholarships that are AB 540 friendly, DACA friendly, or undocumented friendly, right? You still have the right to apply for those. And so the last thing that I wanna say for this is that one of the things that really opened up my educational journey as an undocumented person, even before DACA, was my 30-second elevator pitch. So an elevator pitch, and I've noticed that a lot of college students are not being prepared and they don't know what it is. So I'm going to remind y'all. So imagine if you were going into an elevator unexpectedly, and the person who has your dream job was there in the same elevator, and it's just you and them. and you have 30 seconds to talk to them from one floor to the other and tell them about you. You have 30 seconds to connect with them, sell yourself, and potentially, have them give you a job or have them give you an email because they're interested in your skills. What would you say in those 30 seconds? So as an undocumented person, try to create your 30-second elevator pitch so that folks know that you're looking for opportunities that are undocumented friendly. And maybe you don't feel comfortable coming out with your status. So how do you shape your 30-second elevator pitch for folks to know that you're interested in only specific opportunities? For example, right? Something I would do even if you don't have DACA, or if you have DACA, one of the best opportunities to apply for paid programs is if that program pays through a stipend. Usually undocumented folks, whether you have DACA or not, qualify for opportunities that pay through a stipend. So maybe it's about including that in your 30-second elevator pitch, right? Like, my name is Melody. I'm interested in becoming an engineer, and I'm currently looking for stipend paid opportunities for the summer and for the fall of 2021. It could be as simple as that, or if you don't feel comfortable with your status, you're still trying to adapt to opening up opportunities for yourself. So that's what I did, y'all. I created my 30-second pitch, and one of the communications chair for my department wanted to hire me as a worker, and we realized that we couldn't because I didn't have a social security, and he felt so bad. And what he did is that he looked for opportunities for me to get paid through a stipend, and he found me a $5,000 program. And so I was paid through that. So I was able to work with the Department of U.S. Energy. An undocumented person, got in there because this person listened to my story, but it was also me being vulnerable enough to share my story. So as an undocumented person, right, it's about shaping that story so that folks open up opportunities for yourself here at COC or when you transfer. Okay, so that being said, that's my little bit of golden knowledge for all of you as you embark, as we welcome you into College of the Canyons. And so now I want to just quickly go into my activism journey, because it's really tied to my educational journey and eventually my career that I have now. So I'm gonna go ahead and share screen again. One second. I'm gonna dive into, sorry, let me skip some of these slides. Okay, so going back to me graduating Cal State LA, again, I still didn't have DACA. So I actually, after working at Olvera Street, I ended up getting a job as a hairdresser. So as you can see, this is some of the cute hairstylists I did. I learned how to make a bow and all those little sparkly things that you see on her hair. That was my coworker. I learned how to do all of that. So, again, it came with a lot of shame, right? That I had graduated college and I was working as a hairdresser. But you know what? I was the best hairdresser you could think of. It reminds me of a quote by MLK, right, where it says, like, if you're a janitor, be the best janitor, right? And so that's what I went into, and I still work even after college as a hairdresser at the Grove in West Hollywood. If you know that place, if you've ever been there, I used to work at one of those little kiosks. And again, I want to mention this part because maybe as an undocumented person, you may not get those opportunities or those legit jobs that you've been studying for right off the bat. But whatever it is that you're working in, whether you're working under the table because you don't have DACA or a work permit, or if you are working with DACA, but it's more of a labor job, it's totally okay. Like, it comes with no shame. So I definitely wanted to highlight that because, yeah, as undocumented folks, I feel like we don't talk a lot about the jobs that we do, and regardless of what you're doing, it's still, again, honorable, and it's still getting you through college. So there's no shame in that. So especially if you don't have a work permit, I wanted to highlight that. And so right after I graduated college, I was working as a hairdresser. I was introduced to the movement, and I want to show you all my first protest. As you can see here, it was against Donald Trump. It was in Beverly Hills. You can't tell because I look badass in this picture, but I was super scared because I showed up to this first protest. I didn't have DACA, so I'm like, man, like, you know, I'm gonna get deported. Like, this was really scary for me. I guess maybe that's why I'm serious as well. But I wanted to show you this picture because at that time, I didn't know what I was stepping into, but I knew I had to be there. I knew I had to be in the eye of the hurricane to fight for my rights, because no one is going to fight for my rights as hard as I can, as best as I can. And so I'm going to stop sharing screen, and I'm really excited to dive into this quick part of my presentation. I'm going to go for like 10 more minutes, and then I'll open it up to any questions folks may have, because part of being undocumented, and the reason why a lot of folks are even able to go to school, is because other folks like myself fought before us. Think of it before AB 540. AB 540 is in-state tuition, right? We didn't have that, and people fought for that in 2001. And so for 20 years, we've been benefiting from that law. Undocumented students have been able to go to school and not pay 3 times the price, because brave folks like myself and other folks before me fought for that law. And so I want to encourage y'all, right? There's always a part of the movement for yourself. So, you know, I went the route where I was really public with my story. I definitely wanted to connect with folks who didn't have parents and who were undocumented, and you don't hear a lot about that. So I made a decision for me to go public, and I made a decision to become a high profile dreamer. That's what they call folks whose stories like go viral and stuff. But I made that decision for myself, and it has come with a lot of with a high cost, you know, because I exposed myself to the world, and that comes with a lot of vulnerability. And maybe that's something that you still want to do regardless of the price, but maybe you're not someone who is who likes to be in the public eye. Maybe your role in the movement is to make a flyer for an event that we have. Maybe your role in the movement is to take this information that I'm sharing now and host your own workshop with your church group or any other undocumented students that you know on College of the Canyons, right? It can look very different for folks. But I encourage you to, I'm gonna do my little self just plug here, where we do have events every month, and y'all can just come and join our events and get to know the activism work that we do. There's so many organizations in California that do the work that we do. There's CARECEN, the Central American Resource Center. There's Asian Americans Advancing Justice. There's the Korean Resource Center. There's Siren up in NorCal. There's ACLU. There's just so many organizations that need our help, right? Whether, again, it's making a flyer or doing one of their events or attending one of their workshops. There's so many ways that you can get involved in. So again, I'm going to put my information on the chat as well, so that if you're interested in joining one of our events or invite any other undocumented folks, you're more than welcome to, so that you can start learning like how to be involved and you find your place in the movement and what you can contribute. And so in the last few minutes that I have with y'all, I'm going to go ahead and dive into a little bit about grad school. And actually that ties into my activism journey. So when I became an activist, I actually fell in love with the nonprofit sector, and I was able to apply to USC, and I got in. So I actually ended up going to my dream school. I was only one of 6 women who got into that program. And guess what? They were asking for 5 years of experience, and all I had was 3 months, which was that activism 3-month internship that I did with Chirla. And so on my essay, I was like, look, I only have 3 months, but I know this is what I want to do for a long time and for the next step in my career. And they accepted me. And so, you know, I graduated USC 4 years ago, so I'm still doing it, you know, so I didn't lie on my essay. I was being truthful, but I want to mention that because activism opened the door for me, and maybe a different sector is going to open the door for you, right? And so don't be afraid to make space for yourself into something that calls you, right? And so I'm gonna share screen again, and I'm gonna conclude in these next few slides because I want to leave you with some knowledge as you embark on College of the Canyons, or on your journey. So after I ended up at USC, it was only a 1-year program. I got my master's in 2017. I was 22 when I graduated. So it went by super fast. And because I graduated Cal State LA when I was 20, because I took a bunch of AP classes in high school. So I want to say that too, because if you have any classes that you can substitute and you see that some classes are similar to each other, take a look at the syllabi. Your counselor may be able to give you credit for more than one class at the same time. So stay alert on that. That really helped me graduate faster. And so I want to show you all this picture because this was my first day as an organizer. This was about a month after I graduated USC. I had no idea what I was doing, but I got up in front of that classroom, and those were my 18 interns. I had 18 interns, and I knew that I didn't know the answers, but that we could figure it out together. And so I want to show this because I was so afraid of failing. And so in your college journey, and especially as an undocumented person, right, you may feel that same way. And a lot of it is just going for it. And if you fail, learning for it. And I know it sounds easier being said than done, but it's really what has placed me where I am today, where I'm able to do these type of presentations with confidence, right? Where I am grounded into what I believe and into my truth. But that came with a lot of practice. You see the final product in front of you today, but it took the last 4 years to get me where I am today. And it started with this presentation that you see on your screen. So I definitely encourage y'all to continue that practice as you go through college. And so that brings me to what I wish I'd known as I went through, life and my educational journey as an undocumented person. Already start thinking about your PhD, or already start thinking about grad school. And so I tell you this because, and I have a whole slide to talk about grad school really quickly. And that's because it's never too early to start preparing for it. I also want to mention that going to school with a full-time job is extremely difficult. I know a lot of folks make it seem easy, but it's extremely difficult. And as working class folks, you may be working full-time, and that may delay your graduation to the first point when we started talking in this presentation. So I definitely want to keep that in mind, because I was always very, very hard on myself, where why am I always so tired, or why am I barely awake in class sometimes? And it was because I was working a full-time job, and I wish I had extended more compassion towards myself. So I definitely want to highlight that for you all. The Career Center, I'm pretty sure CLC has a Career Center, career specialist. Make use of it. Definitely, make an appointment and already start cleaning up your resume or asking for tips on how to apply for a job. I don't think enough students are using the Career Center, and it's such an essential tool. And then my last point that I want to make is maybe me talking about activism really sparked something in you, and you're like, damn, I want to join something, I want to do something, but you may not have as much time to be involved. That's totally okay as well. And so the question becomes, what are you doing to open up the door to others, right? Maybe it's about letting everybody else know, like, hey, even without DACA, you qualify for a scholarship. Maybe it's that little word of mouth that you give to someone who's in your same situation. So the question is, what are you doing actively to still be able to make space for others? And then really quickly, preparing for grad school as an undocumented person, start thinking about some of the research that interests you. Maybe research isn't even something that's ever been on your radar, but research definitely opened the door for me to know if grad school was for me or not. A lot of folks go into grad school thinking that it's very similar to undergrad, and I'm here to tell you it is not. It's two different worlds apart. And some of the ways, right, to weed out your passion or your success in grad school is going to be doing research. So already start, pairing up with a professor who has a PhD and who has done research, and start thinking what research hasn't been done in my academic field, and then do the actual research with them. I know professors are always excited to work with students to create new theses or new academic discoveries. So already start thinking about that research, so you see if grad school is for you. If you don't like doing research, then that's fine, but try it out first, right? It's better to just see if it works for you or not. And then the last tip for me is, to continue scheduling those one-on-one meetings with other graduate students or other professionals that have gone through graduate programs that you have. And one last reminder, here in California, depending on the school, you can apply to grad school, whether a master's or a doctorate program, even if you have DACA or not, okay? Your options may be limited, yes, but but you can apply to these different programs, but you gotta start doing the research now. Lastly, sign up for any newsletters of any prospective schools that you want to transfer to, attend recruitment events, and you can even ask to sit in at a class. So maybe you're trying to transfer to, I don't know, USC or UC Davis, whatever. You can already ask to sit in at a class to see if that school is good for you. I don't know if you all knew that, and I found out that a lot of students don't know that they can do that, but that really will solidify your next choice in your career and your academic journey if you are thinking about, transferring or going to grad school. So start doing the research now. And again, scholarships, fellowships, you can apply to a lot of them regardless of your status. I put some on the screen that you can already start looking into. We have the Paul and Daisy Soto's Fellowship. That one's really competitive. So start thinking about it now. And then I put the other two that I got during my undocu journey. So I put Millennium Momentum Foundation. They're an amazing organization. And then the Salvadorian American Leadership Education Fund, otherwise known as SALEF. They do scholarships every year. So already start looking into that and already preparing to apply for those. So I wish you success on the road you built for yourself. Again, I hope that this presentation was really helpful with, taking inspiration with my journey, what I learned, and then some of the steps that you can already start preparing for the next step of your career and your personal life. I'm going to go ahead and put my contact information on the chat, and I'm open to answer any questions y'all may have. Thank you for having me. Left you speechless, huh? Don't worry. It happens all the time. I always say that.
Melody, you are fabulous. Thank you so much for that. I do have a question for you. Many of us, don't talk about, we talk about the challenges that come with, going through our educational path. But I think that there's few of us who are able to be vulnerable enough to talk about going through those challenges pretty much alone. Parents are a huge part of when students are successful just in life. What were some of the things that you learned about yourself and the heightened level of resiliency that I see in you? But tell us a little bit about how that helped shape you as a young woman, not having sort of like your parents as a resource.
Yeah, thank you so much, Fabio. So a lot of it, especially when folks don't have parental support, I think the first step to actually even begin thinking about resilience, it actually starts at the heart of forgiveness for your parents or for your family. Because I had a lot of questions, as to why did my mom leave me, when I was a child? Why isn't she being supportive even when I arrived to Los Angeles? And I've come to so that with a lot of doubt and even, being resentful growing up. And it wasn't until a few years ago when I started therapy that I've come to realize that sometimes our family and our parents love us the best way they can. Even if it's not what we needed or what we asked for them, sometimes they just love us the best way that they can. And so they're humans just like us. And so it starts with that, being understanding and forgiving and not focusing on any resentment that you may have. It's okay to have that resentment, but the key is not to get stuck in that. So I definitely wanted to mention that because that really helped me understand that, okay, well, my mom isn't going to support me. She's not going to help me in any of my classes. So how am I making space for myself to still be successful? And so it started with that first step. And so, going into the resilience that you're talking about, I think a lot of it is that I still went to school telling myself that even that I still had to work for my diplomas as if I had papers, as if I was a US citizen. And I think that comes into fruition today because, as you all know, the immigration reform bill was introduced last week. And I know there's still, a lot of difficulty for us to even pass the bill. But even if it passes, right, if we are successful, then that foundation that you built on your educational journey, going to school as if you had a work permit or as if you had papers, if we eventually do get papers, it's going to work out at the end in that way, right? Like everything that you study for and you graduate and you complete, eventually, if we do have a pathway to citizenship, it's going to be even better, right? Because we'll actually have a permanent solution. So I think I would say those two things, yeah, the forgiveness and then having that, mental state, that mental motivation to still go to school as if you were a citizen, as if you weren't any different because of your legal status.
Thank you, Melody.
Yeah, of course. And I'll open it up to any other questions folks may have.
I don't necessarily have a question other than to say, Melody, that I'm very moved by your journey and your story. And hearing, I guess, when you told me you worked at the alleys in LA, that's when it really was kind of like, wow, man, I've never thought about, because going there and, seeing it kind of first, you don't really, you don't think about it, you know what I mean? But to hear you, say that you was going there for work and then turning around and going up to Cal State LA to participate in seminars, I really do think you're like the living embodiment of like the benefits and the value of higher education, and your experience. And then your experience in a sense heightens that. And so I was very moved by your story. And I took down your information. So I'll definitely be contacting you on anything DACA, or, part of what I do here at College of the Canyons is facilitate dialogues. And I guarantee you, I'm going to be having you come back. And I'm sure Flavio will too, to speak to our students, because I don't think I think your story is not just inspiring for undocumented students, but for students in general. So thank you for sharing.
Yes, Brandon, consider me a resource I think I've seen you in other seminars as well. So I just want to thank you for your active participation too. Anything that you need, or if you need me to come talk to a class, and even if it doesn't have to be immigration related, maybe, woman empowerment or anything of that sort, let me know. I'm more than happy to be a resource for you.
Thank you. I have your information. I'll be sending mine over to you as well.
Hey, Melody, do you want to plug the session that we're going to do for mindfulness and artivism on April 22nd? Tell us what that's about and what to expect with a few minutes left, so we can plant the seeds, so we can't wait to see you again.
Yes, of course. So I actively work with over 50 college campuses across California now that, I have a work permit through DACA, but I also wanted to let you all know, if you don't have a work permit, still message me, because I'm able to find opportunities for you regardless if you have a work permit, but you got to message me, okay? And so through the work that I do with Sheila, I work with Antelope Valley College, which is also in the Antelope Valley. It's far from y'all, but it's still, in the Antelope Valley. And I work with artistic students there. And so we have come to master this thing called the theater of the oppressed. And basically, it's a way for us to express our grief, our happiness, our immigrant experience, our life experiences. And so I work with a really talented youth. His name is Basilio. And with Basilio, we've been able to put, before COVID, a ton of theatrical performances. And so now we've adapted them virtually. So in this workshop that we're having, I think it was April 21st, Flavio, or 22nd?
Yes, April 21st from 4 to 5:15.
Yes, if you come to that workshop, you'll be able to really express yourself, and it's a safe space, and you'll be able to process a lot of your emotions or whatever you're going through the theater of the oppressed. So we do a quick background on the theater of the oppressed, and then we go into different exercises, and it's all around super fun. You may feel funky at first because you get to act out a lot of your emotions, but you get to step out of your comfort zone and you get to process within community. So I hope to see you all there.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Melody. If we don't have anything else from our students, Joanna, Lynn, would you like to close us out?
Sure. Just want to thank you all for being here today, and thank you for allowing us to record this session. I hope that our students, whether they're dreamers or not, will be able to tune in just so that they can spread the information. I think a lot of times our students aren't connected to resources like we'd like to think. So I hope through word of mouth, especially, that they would come to know that, there is a place for them to dream together and to dream big. Thank you.